Good day, this is Group 9 presenting to you Unit 3, Movement and Sustainability. Before anything else, let's talk about how do people interact with their surrounding. Human interaction are depending on what they need to survive, whether it's positive or negative, good or bad. Jumping on to Lesson 9, Global Demography. The world itself, it is a study of statistics which illustrate changing structure of human population. Meaning, people tend to act because they need something. Let's have this rural versus urban image. Some people, pinipili lumuwas sa Maynila para humanap ng trabaho. And that's a need because if you have work, you can make money and money can buy necessities. On the other hand, people from urban places tend to look for a vacation spot in some rural areas. Why? Because they need to disconnect and relax to have better and clear mind to think. And it is not just about money or work why people migrate to other places. Migration is a way to move from one place to another. We also have this international migration, movement of people across international borders for purpose settlement. International migrants change their usual place of residence from one country to another. If the answer is in another country, then they are classified as international migrants.
Good day everyone, I am Joanna Sola de Petilia and now I will be discussing the perils of overpopulation. So first, what is overpopulation? Overpopulation is one of the major problems the planet is facing today, and it directly or indirectly fuels other problems ranging from pollution to global warming. Human overpopulation is among the most pressing environmental issues, silently aggravating the forces behind global warming, environmental pollution, habitat loss, the sixth mass extinction, intensive farming practices, and the consumption of finite natural resources such as fresh water, arable land, and fossil fuels. Overpopulation worsens numerous environmental and social factors such as pollution, malnutrition, overcrowded living conditions, and lacking health care, which makes poor communities vulnerable to infectious diseases. Diseases such as tuberculosis, malaria, HIV, and dysentery spread faster in overpopulated areas. According to Malthusian theory, development planners see urbanization and industrialization as indicators of a developing society, but disagree on the role of population growth or decline in modernization. He specifically stated that the human population increases geometrically while food production increases arithmetically. Under this paradigm, humans would eventually be unable to produce enough food to sustain themselves. And he also believed that a balance between population growth and food supply can be established through preventive and positive checks. He also said that if overpopulation is not controlled, it could lead to widespread poverty. Advocates of population control promotes reproductive health, access to condoms, pills, abortion, and vasectomy, giving women the right to choose whether to have children or not. So what are the reasons of overpopulation? Poverty is the biggest reason to cause the overpopulation. Where rapid population growth far outpaces economic development, countries will have a difficult time investing in the human capital needed to secure the well-being of its people and to stimulate further economic growth. We also have the decline in the death rate, rise in the birth rate, migration, lack of education, reduced mortality rates, and poor medical access and contraceptive use. So how overpopulation is affecting the world? Human population growth impact the Earth system in a variety of ways, including increasing extraction of resources from the environment. The process of removing resources, in turn, often releases pollutants and waste that reduce air and water quality and harm the health of humans and other species. It also associated with negative environmental and economic outcomes ranging from the impacts of overfarming, deforestation, and water pollution to eutrophication and global warming. And how big of a problem is overpopulation? Overcrowding leads to further demand for limited resources, and this in turn can lead to more conflict and warfare. As humans seek out more resources, they take over land that was once the habitat of other species, leading to huge biodiversity loss. And it also affects our everyday life because overpopulation hinders development and adversely affects the spread of education and healthcare among the masses. It is observed that the poor beget more children. It only leads them to unending poverty. More children does not mean more workers, but merely more people without work. And we also have the effects of overpopulation. Effects of overpopulation are different for many countries but are mostly associated with poverty, reduced mortality rates, poor medical access, poor contraceptive use, as well as immigration. With overpopulation comes a decrease in resources and an increase in symptoms of illness and diseases. It also increased demand for food, water, housing, energy, healthcare, and transformation, the employment problem, education problem, the problem of pollutions, the problem of poverty, and the problem of imbalance between import and export. And lastly, we also have the solutions. One of the most effective steps we can take to reduce our collective environmental impact is to choose a smaller family size and empower those who can't make that choice freely to do so. A little less makes a lot of difference. So, if that happens, our population will be smaller than it is today and we can also bring the birth rates down. Although the population growth in the 20th and 21st centuries skyrocketed, it can be slowed, stopped, and reversed through actions which enhance global justice and improve people's lives. Continue to strive to reduce suffering by combating disease and poverty around the world. Continue to improve resource efficiency and pollution control so that the standard of living can rise without negative impact. Keep human population to number that are sustainable. Children today are the adults tomorrow. Mandatory sex education at schools. Using media to convey the message. Family planning programs for villages and remote areas. Improve health care to reduce infant and child mortality, restrict child marriage and raise the legal age of marriage, minimum of 18 years old, and empower women. We need to follow these solutions or take many actions to reduce the impact of those of us already here, especially the richest of us who have the largest environmental impact, including through reducing consumption to sustainable levels and systematic economic changes. So that's all for the perils of overpopulations.
Oh, good day everyone, this is Justin, and for another topics under the lesson 9, the global demography, we have the so-called it is the economy, not the babies. But first, let's talk about the world economy. The world economy or global economy, it's the economy of all humans of the world, referring to global economic system that includes all economic activity within nations and between nations, including production, consumption, economic management, exchange of financial values, and trade of goods and services. The world economy, it is pertaining to an economy holistically. It is all about the whole world's economic growth that pertains to all activities of the nations and to all the nations. There are 195 countries in the world today, and the world economy is circulating in these 195 countries worldwide. Meaning, when we say world economy, it's not only about the economic activity of one state or nation. It is all about the economic activities of all the states across the globe by means of production, consumption, economic management, exchange of financial values, and trade of goods and services. And these variables are so-called economic system or the way in which economic activities are managed in a country. Therefore, the world economy is the combination of all economic system of every state in the world. And the next one will be the change in world economy. According to Drucker, 1986, the world economy has changed profoundly since World War II, and the most fundamental change is the emergence of global markets responding to opportunities global competitors have steadily displaced or absorbed local ones. As per Drucker, 1986, the world economy has changed profoundly since World War II, meaning in 1939, where World War II started, until 1945, the end of war. Starting from that point, our world economy has changed, such as the emergence of global markets and a lot of opportunities have been born and competitors have been displaced. So therefore, 77 years after the war ended, we already experienced a huge difference in world economics. On the other hand, Krugman 1992 stated that just 30 years ago, the world was far less integrated than it is today, and one of the evidence of it that has taken place is the automobile industry, wherein the European cars have a huge difference from the American automobile and to the Japanese car products, in which the global trade remarks a new development for the world economy. Per Krugman 1992, in just 30 years, the most abundant observance in the world economy is the emergence of the automobile industry that started to play a vital role in improving the economic growth of their own state and remarks to a new development for the world economy. Furthermore, within the past decades, there have been several remarkable changes in the world economy. Organization stands a better chance of achieving success when plans and strategies are based on the new realities of change of world economy, according to Simon and Chester 1997. Herein, capital movements rather than trades have become the driving force of the world economy. Production has become a source of generating employment. The world economy dominates the scenes and individual economies play a subordinating role, and also the 75-year struggle between capitalism and socialism is largely over. And now, let's talk about the population. Everyone is a member of population, and population factors have an impact on many pieces of life, from where we live to the prices we pay for goods and services. Sa madaling sabi, lahat tayo na nilalang na may buhay ay bahagi ng populasyon, at ang ating pagkakakilanlan ay malaki ang kinalaman sa kung paano natin binubuhayan ang ating sarili sa komunidad na ating kinabibilangan. And now, for the tools of demography, the world population currently stands at exceeding 7.9 billion people and around 385,000 babies per born each day. So meaning, ang populasyon sa buong mundo ay tinatayang nasa 7.9 billion katao, at ang pinapanganak kada araw ay tinatayang nasa 385,000 individuals. And population growth is a major concern because many believe that as the number of people on this planet increases, the quality of life goes down. This is the sad reality of today's view of world, sapagkat totoo na sa pagtaas ng dami ng bilang ng tao ay ang pagbaba naman ng kwalidad ng buhay nito due to the fact of inappropriate distributions of goods and services and inappropriate consumptions of what the production produces and created. Population growth rates represent the difference between the numbers of people added to and subtracted from the population. In the most industrialized nations today, the population growth rate is less than 1%, but in a developing nation, it is over 3% as per Thompson and Heike 2006. So meaning, kung ikaw ay naninirahan sa isang developing nations tulad ng Pilipinas, ang pagtaas ng populasyon ay tinatayang nasa 3%, mas mataas ng ilang bahagdan kumpara sa mga nasa industrialized nations tulad ng Russia and America. In terms of demography, we have the so-called proportion. It is a relation of population subgroup to the entire population. That is a population subgroup divided by the entire population. For example, the proportion of Malaysia's population classified as urban was 0.57 or 0.57%. Kapag sinabi naman natin proportion, ito ay ang bahagi ng isang komunidad or bahagi ng isang kabuuan ng isang komunidad. Halimbawa, sa Malaysia, ang populasyon sa Malaysia na ikinukonsidera bilang urban ay nasa 57% or mas mataas ng 7% kumpara sa mga taong naninirahan sa mga rural areas. And constant are the unchanging arbitrary numbers. For example, 100, 1,000, or 100,000, by which ratios or proportions can be multiplied to express these measures in a more understandable fashion. For example, 0.01 people live births per person occurred in Cuba in 1996. Multiplying this rate by a constant 1,000 gives the same statistic in terms of 1,000 people. Always remember that when we say constant, it is an unchanging arbitrary. So therefore, no matter how much the ratio is, if we are going to multiply it to a constant number, we are going to have an answer of an equal. And for the cohort measures, it is a statistic that measures events occurring to a cohort or a people or a group of people sharing a common demographic experiences who are observed through time. The best example for cohort measures in terms of tools of demography is the region by region demographic profile of a state. For example, we are living in National Capital Region wherein the populations are much more higher than the other areas such as in Region 4A and Region 4B. That is a cohort measures. You are going to get the demographic profile or identity of certain regions by means of population rate. And for the period measures, it is a statistic that measures events occurring to all part or part of population during the period of time. This measure takes a snapshot of population in effect. For example, the death rate of entire Canadian population in 1997 was 7 per 1,000 individual. Always remember that when it comes to a period measure, we are pertaining to a 1-year period that occurred in a specific time. And as per the example, in 1997, in 1,000 individuals, you have 7 people who are recorded as dead. The period here was given in 1997. Year 1997, don't forget about it. And now let's talk about the population theories. The two dominant theories in the area of population are the Malthusian theory and the demographic transition theory. Malthusian theory. Thomas Malthus was an English minister and college professor who is best known for the Malthusian theory of population, which he described in his essay on the principles of population published in 1798. His premise was that human beings reproduce faster than it was possible to grow food for them. When the population increased geometrically, the food supply increased arithmetically. Thomas Malthus' premises about the human beings' reproductions are much higher than their ability to produce foods wherein the populations are increasing geometrically or they are multiplying the numbers, while the food supply are increased arithmetically or just adding the numbers. Therefore, if the human beings reproduce geometrically, the food supply will tend and decline immediately. Malthus also believed that famine, disease, and war would slow down but not enough the rate of population growth. In Malthusian theory, sinaadi ni Malthus na ang mga sakit at ang giyera ay maaaring magpababa sa mabilis na pagtaas ng populasyon. Ngunit hindi iyon sasapat sapagkat ang giyera at mga sakit ay pansamantala lamang at maaaring maibsan at masolusyonan. While disease would result in part from malnutrition due to the shortage of food, competition over the limited amount of food would lead to war. Death through sickness and war would reduce pressures in the land to produce beyond its capacity, and the amount of food would be enough to feed those that remained. According to Knox 1990, isinaad lamang dito ni Knox year 1990 that in every actions we did, there is always a consequences that we need to face. It is literally true that the malnutrition was due to the lack or shortage of food supply. Kapag ang isang tao hindi nakaka-receive ng sapat na pagkain, definitely he or she will be a malnutritious individual. And another one is the competition over the limited amount of food would lead to war. But in today's view, alam naman natin kung ano ang nagaganap sa Ukraine and Russia. That is a Russia-Ukraine invasion. But that is not all about the limited food supply. It is all about the dominant power of Ukraine joining the NATO. And it leads to different casualties on both sides, especially the Ukraine, wherein it resulted in a huge number of persons or individuals that has recorded as dead. And death through sickness or ang mga kamatayan bunsod ng pagkakasakit at giyera ay isang solusyon upang makabawasan ang bilang ng mga individual, at ito ay makakatulong upang maging sapat ang food supply sa isang bansa. And when Malthus wrote the population increase, he had 4 effects on mind as per Simon 1986. The first one was the consumption effect. It is the more the people, the fewer resources each person gets. Meaning sa pagdami ng tao ay sa pag-unti ng kanya mapapakinabangang mga bagay-bagay sapagkat marami silang maghahati-hati sa isang resources. Another one is the production effect. It is the more the people, the less output per worker. Production effect is much more deeper in consumption because we are pertaining on how the people will be productively active in a certain workplace. Therefore, kapag mas madami kayo, mas mapapadali ang gawain at mas madali kayong makakatapos. And the third one was the public facilities effect. It is the more the people, the less benefits a person gets from public facilities. Public facilities effects are linked to the consumption effect. This is stated na sa pagdami ng tao, sa pagunti ng benepisyong iyong mapapakinabangan mula sa mga pampublikong lugar tulad ng mga transportasyon, kalusugan at mga iba pang mga sosyal na gawain at paaralan. And the last one was the age distribution effect. That is, the faster the population grows, the larger the proportion of the population that is young. Since the young do not work, the burden is on the older workers to support the needs of the young. It is very common in a typical Filipino culture that kung sino yung matanda, siya yung nag-work for the youngest brothers and sisters. So therefore, Malthusian theory stated that sa mabilis na pagtaas ng bahagda ng populasyon ay sa pagtaas din ng bilang ng mga taong walang trabaho na nagre-resulta sa isang gawaing unethical. And Malthus believed that the way to slow the population was for people to marry at later age and refrain from other activities until marriage. In addition, sexual abstinence, in which Malthus referred to as moral restraints, as viewed as necessary to control population and to channel energy toward achieving productive goals before marriage. However, Malthus had a dismal view of our ability to limit our sexual appetites and so believed humankind would inevitably be faced with overpopulation. Aside from the poor effects, Malthus also believed na ang isa sa mga paraan upang maiwasan ang mabilis na dami o pagtaas ng populasyon ay ang pag-aasawa sa mga late na taon. For example, you are going to marriage at the age of 30, having a financially stable wherein you can sustain the daily needs of your families. And another thing is the refrain from different sexual activities that resulted to some circumstances that may lead to a bizarre act of certain individual. But since we human are just like before, Malthus had a dismal view of it, and human couldn't limit their sexual appetites. Therefore, humankind might face an overpopulated in the near future. Aside from the Malthusian theory, we also have the demographic transition theory that suggests that changes in the rate of population growth result as a society becomes industrialized. A three-stage process outlines how the population is affected as society makes the transition from being pre-industrial to industrial. For stage 1, it is stated that in pre-industrial society, both the birth rate and the death rate are high. This creates a rough cancellation effect that results in a stable population that either does not grow or grows very slowly. Meaning, during the pre-industrial society, both the birth and death rate are so high, therefore the stable results are visible, and the growth of economics are not a big deal. And for stage 2, as a society begins to make the transition from agricultural to industrial, the death rate begins to fall due to improvements in sanitation and healthcare and food supply and distribution. The continuing high birth rate in conjunction with the declining death rate leads to a rapid increase in population. And in stage 2, as the agricultural move to industrial, the birth rates are starting to decline. Therefore, the lower the death rate, the higher the birth rate, and resulted to a rapid increase in populations and leads to the lack of food supply and distribution. And for stage 3, as society reached an advanced stage of industrialization, the birth rate declined due to the availability of inexpensive forms of contraceptives and social pressures to have smaller families. The declined birth rate are compensate for the low death rate, and so population grows slowly and may even decline. In stage 3, it is also pertaining to the modernizations of the state. Due to the availability of different contraceptions, the birth rate are starting to decline, and same with the death rate, and the populations grow slowly or may even decline. In demographic transition theory, always remember that in stage 1, there is an equilibrium between the birth rate and death rate. In stage 2, while the agriculture are moved to industrial, the birth rate are increasing while the death rate are declining. And in stage 3 in modern world, the birth rate are declining, same with the death rate of the state. And aside to the two dominant theory in population, we also have Marxian theory. We already know who Karl Marx is, but today Karl Marx is the one who believed that the problem was not primarily one of the population, but one of the ownership of the means of productions and the inequitable distribution of society's wealth. Therefore, ang paniniwala naman ni Karl Marx ay ibang-iba sa paniniwala sa demographic and Malthusian theory. Dito ay binigyan diin ni Karl Marx na ang pangunahing problema ay hindi ang pagtaas ng populasyon, kundi ang hindi patas na pamamahagi ng yaman ng isang komunidad o ng isang bansa. He also contended that the solution to population problem lay in the establishment of a new social order or the socialist order. And as the year goes by, Betsy Hartman is the one who disagrees with the advocates of neo-Malthusian theory and accused governments of using population control as substitute for social justice and much needed reforms such land distribution, employment creation, provision of mass education and healthcare and emancipation. Matatandaan sa Malthusian theory ay sinaad ni Thomas Malthus na ang isa sa pinakamabisang daan upang maiwasan ang mabilis na pagtaas ng populasyon ay ang sexual abstinence, ngunit iyon ay ginagamit lang umano upang akusahan ang gobyerno na pagpapalit sa isang social justice according to Betsy Hartman. And according to him, ang pinaka-kailangan talaga ay ang mga reforma sa pagdidistribusyon ng lupa, pagpuproduce ng mga trabaho at pagsasagawa ng isang pangmalawakang edukasyon, pangkalusugan at another thing is, others pointed out that the population growth aided economic development by spurring technological and institutional innovation. Aside from Betsy Hartman, who suggests that we much needed to have a land reform distribution and other activities, the others pointed that what we much needed to aid the progressive or the rapid increase in population growth are the development of a new and innovative institutional. And now, let's talk about the population control strategies. In general, the nations of the world are trying to control their population growth through one or more strategies, like family planning, anti-natalism, or that is the anti-birth policies, and economic improvement. First is the very common one, the family planning. Family planning programs have been designed to provide information and services as a means of fertility control. Family planning is the most dominant advocacy of the Philippine government in order to reduce the rapid increase of population. It includes some informative assessment in which focuses on the reproductive system of a female. And another thing is the government regulation or anti-birth. This strategy involves public policies intended to discourage birth. Kung matatandaan natin way back then, the Republic of China or the Chinese government implemented a one-child policies. That is to reduce the rapid increase of their population. And we also have the economic improvement. The demographic transitions is closely linked to economic development, but many of the less developed nations may not have achieved the rapid economic growth necessary to raise their living standards to the appropriate level. Economic improvement is just another thing for states which belong in the developing countries or yung mga below sa third world country, kahit na gustuhin nila na mapataas ang kanilang ekonomiya dahil sa limitadong supply ng mga resources, ay hindi nila maisaayos ang pamumuhay. And another thing is the urbanization and distribution. Urbanization is the increase in the proportion of the populations living in urban areas, the process of people moving to cities or other densely settled areas. Population distribution refers to the pattern of settlement and dispersal of population within a county or other areas. Metro Manila or the National Capital Region has a large percentage of individuals who are living in different places, while in other places of the Philippines, we only have at least hundreds thousands of individuals. Therefore, for the urbanizations and distribution, this aims to produce an equal distributions in terms of populations in different regions of the state. Another thing is the so-called ecology. It is the study of interaction between living organisms and the natural environment. The natural environment refers to the Earth's surface and the atmosphere, including living organisms, air, water, soil, and other resources necessary to sustain life. Meaning the ecology is an study wherein living organisms and natural environment interacted. And the natural environment refers to everything that a man's need in order to sustain his life. Therefore, if the natural environment are not given, the man's life are also not given. And our ecosystem has only two simple principles that we need to acquire and obtain. First is natural resources are finite. Every ecosystem therefore has a limited carrying capacities, a limited number of living things that it can support. It is the first thing that we humans need to consider. And acquired. We should always take in mind or bear in mind that our natural resources are finite and it has a limitations. So never use it as an advantage for your own will. Second is we can never do just one thing because everything is related to everything else. If we try to alter one aspect of ecosystem, we end up changing others as well. And second principle, it is considered as the domino effect and or the third law of motions that is stated that in every action there is an equal and opposite reactions. Therefore, everything we do to change the ecosystem will not only affect our ecosystem, it will affect the ecosystem of the environmental resources that our societies have. And for the relationship of populations and ecosystem, population and ecology are closely related to each other. The growth of populations can be burden to the environment, depleting its resources and threatening human and animal life. This is particularly true for many poor and developing countries like Bangladesh, Bolivia, Sri Lanka, India, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And in order for you all to visualize it clearly, we prepared a short summary about the topic. It is the economy, not the baby. First is the higher the population, the lower the economic growth. So, ibig sabihin, kapag kataas ng populasyon ay ang pagbaba ng ekonomiya ng isang bansa. Bakit? Kasi sa pagtaas ng populasyon ay hindi din naman tumataas ang produksyon ng manggagawa. Nababawasan lang lalo ang mga nagtatrabaho due to the improper handling of goods and services. Second is malnutrition theory suggests that in order to lessen the population growth, people should practice the sexual abstinence. And ang malnutrition theory, ang pinupunto lang nito ay ang iwasan ng tao ang ma-engage in different sexual activities that resulted to some vigorous and bizarre casualties. And for the demographic theory, it suggests that population growth was once the reason for a society to be industrialized. So if we heard the word, well, the society need to be industrialized, demographic theory is the theory behind that theme. And population control strategies were considered as the most effective ways to lessen the population growth. Therefore, aside from malnutrition theory or the suggested practices of Thomas Malthus, another thing is the population control strategies, and it was one of the most effective strategies that we ever known. Another thing is the population control is not all about fertility control as per Betsy Hartman. And malnutrition theory is all about implementing new reforms and ideals. And lastly, energy and matter are constantly being transformed and transferred with the components of an ecosystem, providing the organism with the essential life. In simple words, the topic it's the economy, not the babies, are pertaining on how the rapid increase of populations may affect the economic development of a state and how different theories and strategies may help to reduce or lessen the increase in population growth and improve the economic activity of state for the people and to the people. Once again, this is Justin. Thank you for listening.
Women and reproductive rights. Human rights incorporate women's rights. Human rights apply to all of us. These rights include the freedom from violence and discrimination, the right to the best possible physical and mental health, the right to an education, the right to own property, the right to vote, and the right to an equal salary. However, discrimination based on sex and gender continue to be a problem for many women and girls around the world. Gender inequality is at the root of slew of issues that disproportionately affect women and girls, including domestic and sexual abuse, low wages, a lack of educational opportunities, and inadequate healthcare. Reproductive rights. Anyone should be able to make their own decisions regarding their bodies. Sexual and reproductive rights are guaranteed to every woman and girl. This means they have equal access to health services such as contraceptive and safe abortions, as well as the freedom to choose whether, when, and with whom they marry. They also choose whether or not to have children, and if so, how many, when, and with whom. Gender-based violence, such as rape and other forms of sexual abuse, female genital mutilation (FGM), forced marriage, forced pregnancy, forced abortion, or forced sterilization should be prevented.
And I will be discussing the feminist perspective. The feminist perspective has much in common with the conflict perspective. However, instead of focusing broadly on equal distribution of power and resources, feminist sociology studies power in its relation to gender. The feminist theory analyzes gender stratification through the intersection of gender, race, and class. Gender stratification occurs when gender differences give men greater privilege and power over women, transgender, and gender non-conforming people. Feminist theory uses the conflict approach to examine the enforcement of gender roles and inequalities, highlighting the role of patriarchy in maintaining the oppression of women. Feminist focuses on the theory of patriarchy as a system of power that organizes society into complex of relationship based on the assertion of male supremacy. Intersectionally suggests that various forms of oppression, such as racism, classism, and sexism, are interrelated to form a system of oppression in which various forms of discrimination intersect. The theory was first highlighted by Kimberly Crenshaw. Intersectionally suggests that various biological, social, and cultural categories, including gender, races, class, and ethnicity, interact and contribute towards systematic social inequality. Therefore, various forms of oppression do not act independently but are interrelated. Feminist theory has developed in three waves. First wave focused on suffrage and political rights. Second wave focused on social inequality between the genders. Third wave emphasizes the concepts of globalization, postcolonialism, post-structuralism. Post-structuralism is an extension of structuralism influenced by the effort to deconstruct or challenge traditional categories. The postmodernism and postmodernism. Postmodernism is any style in art, architecture, literature, philosophy, etc. that reacts against an early modernist movement. Third wave feminist theory critiques generalization about sex and gender. Feminist theory also studies the intersection of sex, gender, sexuality, race, nationality, and economic status. Feminism conflict with multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is a characteristic of a society that has many different ethnic or national cultures mingling freely. It can also refer to political or social policies which support or encourage such as coexistence. Important in this is the idea that cultural practices, no matter how unusual, should be tolerated as a measure of respect. Multiculturalism necessitates the tolerance of foreign cultural practices. Some of those practices would maintain an oppression of women that feminists find essentially intolerable and unacceptable.
Population growth and food security. Ano nga bang ibig sabihin nito? Based on the estimate, 70% ang pagtaas ng produksyon sa pagkain ay kinakailangan din isaalang-alang, lalo na sa pagtaas ng presyo ng enerhiya at lalo na pagkaubos ng tubig sa lupa, pagkawala ng lupang sakahan sa urbanisasyon at potensyal na pagbaha at tagtuyot ng lupa dahil sa pagbabago ng klima. Dagdag pa dito, the global population has been expanding rapidly for many years, standing at around 7.3 billion in 2016, due to a number of factors, such as advanced maternity and healthcare. However, the rise brings with it a number of challenges around global sustainability, including the need for more food. As an essential resource, the supply of food is a major concern across all countries. But as with any resource, is dependent on growers, suppliers, and distributors to bring it to market. In short, sa lahat ng bansa, concern ito. Ngunit, tulad ng anumang mapagkukunan ay nakasalalay sa mga grower, supplier at mga distributor upang dalhin ito sa merkado. Based on Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, ang pandaigdigang populasyon ay inaasahang tataas ng humigit kumulang 2.3 bilyong tao sa pagitan ngayon at 2050. Bagamat ito ay isang mas mabagal na rate ng paglago kaysa nakita natin sa nakalipas na 40 years, ito ay 30% na pagtaas pa rin sa bilang ng mga taong mangailangan ng pagkain. Kasabay nito, Ang dami ng pagkain na kailangan ay proseso ay tataas ng halos 70% at 100% sa papaunlad na mundo. Nangangahulugan ng pagtaas ng supply ng ilang mga produkto upang makatulong na makayanan ng demand. Earnings in developing countries are expected to rise, along with the growth and exceeded so-called economic poverty levels with the market demand for food continue to grow in line with this. Annual production of cereal will need to grow by almost 1 billion tons and meat production by over 200 million tons to a total of 470 million tons in 2050. 70% of this will take place in developing countries, up from 58% simula ngayon. Mapunta naman tayo sa balancing quality and quantity. Habang tumataas ang pamantayan sa kaligtasan at pagkain at nagbabago ang panlasa at hinihingi ng end user, magiging pangunahing issue ang kalidad. Isa sa mga pangunahing layunin para sa mga negosyo ng pagkain ay kung paano makamit ang balanse ng kalidad at dami. Ang pamumuhunan na kailangan upang makamit ang mga layunin ito ay magiging isang pangunahing paksa para sa mga producer, lalo na ang bilang ng populasyon. Ay nagsasabi na ang pagtugon sa tumataas na demand ay darating sa isang malaking halaga. Ang mga supplier o distributor at lalahanin ay nangangailangan manatiling napapanahon sa mga pagbabago. Nangungulugan ito ng pagtiyak na natutugunan ng mga pangangailangan ng pagkain at ang pamumuhunan sa inaharap na supply ay sapat. Ang pamumuhunan na ito ay umaabot sa teknolohiya na gumaganap ng napakahalagang papel sa pagtulong sa industriya na pataasin ang produksyon ng pagkain ng hindi nakompromiso ang kalidad. Ito ang population growth and food security. Thank you.
Let us now go with our conclusion. We have learned that population changes have potentially huge implications for the pace and progress of economic development, particularly for overpopulation that directly and indirectly affecting problems such as pollution, the global warming, and other problems. It can also lead to resource and environmental degradation. So there are two dominant theories in population. The first one is malthusian theory and the demographic transition theory. Demographic transition theory predicts trends in birth and death rates in countries based on their level of industrial development, wherein we have learned the three-stage process on how the population is affected as a society transitions from being pre-industrial to industrial. Next is Malthusian theory, a theory that elucidates that populations growing at an alarming rate can grow beyond the food available. We learn from Thomas Malthus' premise that human beings reproduce faster than it was possible to grow food for them. Thus, population increases geometrically while the food supply increases arithmetically. For Martian theory, it suggested that for population control, the fall of capitalism is the only means in distributive justice. State control over resources can mitigate the food crisis. Karl Marx believed that the problem was not primarily one of population, but one of the ownership of the means and the inequitable distribution of society's wealth. Women's sexual and reproductive health is related to multiple human rights, including the right to life, the right to be free from torture, the right to health, the right to privacy, the right to education, and the prohibition of discrimination. Feminist theory analyzes gender stratification through the intersection of gender, race, and class. Feminism focuses on the theory of patriarchy as a system of power that organizes society into a complex of relationship based on the assertion of male supremacy. Multiculturalism is oppositional to feminism to assume that minority of women based on their cultural practices and the oppression of women. Lastly, population growth is projected to grow significantly. Thus, much must change before hunger can be successfully and sustainably eradicated.
I hope the stars